Well, I think first and foremost, I see my work as psychological. So the pictures are always a kind of projection of my own psychological fears and anxieties and desires. So I never really see them as comments on society or in. But if people like to read them in that way, that's fine. Well, I definitely consider myself a storyteller, but the pictures are involved in a different kind of narrative than, let's say, film or literature, in that it's a photograph is always frozen and mute in time. So it always remains a question in a certain way. So I'm really interested in telling a story that is always remains an open question, never fully resolved. I think my pictures are involved in a moment between before and after. And as a photographer, I'm never particularly interested in resolving that sort of question of what's happened or what's about to happen. Well, I very much see myself working within a particularly American tradition of artists who explore the intersection between everyday life and theatricality. So the artists that most have inspired me or shaped me in one way or another are artists that sort of exist within that similar realm. So I'm, I've been very influenced by the paintings of Edward Hopper, for instance, or the photographs of Diane Arbus or William Eggleston, Joel Sternfeld or Stephen Shore, Cindy Sherman, the films of David Lynch and Steven Spielberg, Hitchcock, and fiction writers, Raymond Carver, John Cheever, all of these artists who, in one way or another, have reinvented the American landscape to tell their particular story. Well, Beneath the Roses, which is in many ways my sort of most characteristic project, has two different modes of picture making. There are photographs that are made on location, and there are photographs that are made on a soundstage. So for the location pictures, it always starts with me location scouting months before the picture and just driving around and going to different locations over and over again, and then through that process a story emerges, and then I start working with my director of photography and my location scout and line producer, and then it slowly builds into a production where then there's hundreds of people, not hundreds of people, but many people involved in making the pictures. And then the other mode is on a soundstage, which is where I build the interiors. And that process usually begins with an image that occurs to me when I'm swimming. And then I start just making sketches and then researching source materials, movies, start working with an art director, and then pick out wallpaper and props and then build the sets. And sort of that's done on a location too. So there's two very different ways of working. But in the end, it's my hope that the location pictures and the pictures on the soundstage emerge into the same world, that they become part of the same universe in and are recognizable as such. There's an important relationship between the figure and the setting, and I'm always aware of how that relationship is working. Usually in the landscapes, the figure is smaller, and that they just become a kind of part of the sort of larger drama of the scene. And then in the interiors, I think it's maybe more overtly psychological or dramatic. But I'm really looking for somewhat particular types, I think, that I'm drawn to, that I sort of use to inhabit this world. Well, after Beneath the Roses, I knew I wanted to make a body of pictures that were dramatically different and challenge my own expectation of things. That I think is part of what an artist needs to do. I wanted to do something more sort of smaller scale and more sort of within the tradition of documentary photography. And I had was in Rome and had always heard about Cinecittà Studios and all the great movies that were made there, Fellini and onwards. And then I took a tour of the studio just because I was interested in seeing it. And as soon as I saw the back lot and the collapsed old sets and just sitting there in various levels of decay, I knew immediately this is a project I want to do. What's interesting to me is that although on the surface the pictures are so dramatically different in terms of production than Beneath the Roses, in the end, I think they tell a similar story. There's a similar sense of beauty and sadness and an interest in the relationship between movies and still photography and artifice and nature. Well, I had just finished the exhibiting the sanctuary pictures, and I'm in that sort of mode of trying to figure out what the next part of the story is going to be, which is always a kind of scary predicament. But I feel pretty sure that I'm going to sort of go back onto to photograph again in the very same towns that I've always photographed, but find maybe a new way of telling that story.